Hi, so in the following, I'll present an e-based teaching plan promoting language learning and digital literacies in the ESL classroom. First, I'll define and talk a bit about digital literacies and its homework framework, the SAMR model, before briefly talking about digital literacies in the Norwegian curriculum, and then presenting main parts of a teaching plan promoting language learning and digital literacies for 7th grade ESL learners, and of course the references at the very end. So, what are digital literacies? Dudney, Hockley, and Pegram define it as the individual and social skills needed to effectively interpret, manage, share, and create meaning in the growing range of digital communication channels. When talking about why you should focus on digital literacies in the classroom, they differentiate between the external imperatives, stating that you should teach it for the sake of itself because it has a relevance in the real world, but also its internal imperatives, meaning that it could be beneficial for teaching and then more specifically language teaching. There are other related terms such as digital competency, media literacy, but Hockley and Dudney et al. Use digital literacies, and furthermore they view it as a state of mind rather than a set of skills to be ticked off. Nonetheless, it consists of 4 overlapping skill sets: language, information, connection, and redesign focuses. And this is then shown through the framework for digital literacies found in the book of Dudney et al. And furthermore, they reveal that within those there are subcategories which also have increasing or various degrees of complexity. So this can all then seem very abstract, and then luckily Ruben Puentedura then has developed this SAMR model, which attempts to reveal how technology integration can enhance and or transform language teaching. The enhancement connected to substitution and augmentation is regarded as the lower level, where you, for instance, switch the pen and paper with a keyboard and augment further by implementing then word processing tools. And then the transformation part is related to a higher level, where a task is significantly reshaped and redefined through, for instance, collaborative process writing, multimodal competition, and flipped classrooms. And with that in mind, in the following, I'll attempt to illustrate how one can adopt this transformational approach, both in the process and in the production of creative tasks, or tasks where students are to create a product. A bit more then about digital literacy in the Norwegian curriculum. It is considered a basic skill area, and in that sense Norway has come a long way in incorporating digital literacies in its national curriculum, according to Allen. I've found some especially relevant English subject competence aims after completing 7th grade, where you are, which I have brought in this teaching plan, or with me into this teaching plan, and working on enabling the students to use digital resources and other aids in one language learning, where you can see that it is mentioned explicitly in digital resources. Understand and use of vocabulary related to familiar topics. Understand the main content of oral texts about familiar topics. Narrate about people, places, and events in English-speaking countries. Converse about the way people live and socialize in different cultures in English-speaking countries. The teaching plan is revolved around the topic English-speaking countries, and it's aimed at 7th grade students. In that sense, this is, according to Allen, a topic-driven approach where I will add on the digital literacies, and I am not using the textbook at all, so it's not textbook driven. I am inspired by our discussions from Module 1 in this course, communication course, where we ended up talking a bit or discussing a bit about the relevance of English varieties. And therefore the product is then a must-know guide to an English-speaking countries, where the students are then to collaborate in groups of 3 on creating a multimodal product. So my classroom is considered a high-tech classroom where the students have a one-to-one coverage of iPads, which they have now had for 4 years, and this is important to keep in mind. And it easily allows me to plan and execute both collaborative tasks and individual tasks in the classroom, and also to then use this flipped classroom in my teaching. I've formulated some learning outcomes. I can use various digital tools to create a multimodal presentation in English. I can collect and relay information about an English-speaking country. I can discuss and compare specific traits of a country with my classmates. Yes, and I also thought a bit about the pre-tasks and requirements before starting this project. I'm inspired by specifically by activity 45 and 46 in Dudney et al., but I have then made some personal tweaks and adjustments. But I think what they mention about the necessary vocabulary is good to keep in mind, and also as they suggest to have students start off this task by brainstorming in groups and collectively on what English-speaking countries they know of, and what they know about those countries, and what they need to find out before when embarking on such a task or such a project. And then also, how can we learn about a new country? Perhaps besides the perhaps most obvious option, going there or getting to know someone that's from there. And also to include some information about that they have to include some information about history, geography, etc. And through these discussions, formulate content criteria, which they can then use to guide them underway or during the process, and then also can be helpful for peer, self, and teacher assessment, which I'll talk a bit more about later. I think it's important also to include a bit about the colonies and age of imperialism to help them see the greater context and let them then further research these events on their own. One can then think that it's a good way is to model and monitor how they execute their own resource or research, and in Google, for instance, but also to provide them with some sources that are suitable for them. So what I would do is take, when working on this topic, I would think what is a very typical task where the students are to give a clear description with a complementary illustration on the geographic location of a country. But I think through using Google Earth, you get to be more innovative and use it and give much more creative descriptions, and it's redefining the task in terms of how easily they can give a more visual and concrete overview, and while also learning through the process themselves. Some examples of the kind of, you get to typical tourist information, you have also the street view option, and so on. And I found this source from the EdTech review where they talk about this kind of task specifically. And as you see, if you use Google Earth instead of an atlas to locate a place, you are within the enhancement part of the SAMR model, which is, but through creating a narrated Google Earth guided tour and sharing this online, you are then within the transformational part of the SAMR model. Also, I would have provide the students with this Salabi source, which has its own section focusing on English-speaking countries, where they can gather information and check what they haven't understood, and also use this to create a kind of remix task where they take this information and communicate it differently in their own presentation, and even combine it with the Google Maps task. Yeah. And also this is watching these clips and performing the tasks on this site is something that the students can do at home, and then when returning to class they can spend their time discussing the videos in the respective groups and incorporating the information in their own product, as well as the teacher then being available for that part of the task. And it's an excellent opportunity as well to educate students on citing sources related more to the information-based skills within digital literacies. Furthermore, there is a YouTube channel called Geography Now, where you get full presentations of various countries, which they can both use as a source with the information, but also they can model after when in creating their own presentations. And I know that for a fact that there are many similar videos, but this even includes Norwegian subtitles, which can be very helpful as the hosts tend to speak at a high pace. But also this can also be then a flipped classroom task where they watch the video at home and then more take on the production aspect of the task at school, or the remix aspect then. So hopefully this can then create new meanings by sampling and combining existing tasks, and just not just reviewing the works of others, but also creating. And then enhancing the remix literacy. Finally, assessment and final implications. You have to take into consideration both the linguistic aspect, the technological aspect, as well as the process versus the product. And what Dani et al. Said is important is to consider and open up to self, peer, and teacher assessment at the various various processes or all parts of a task. It's important then to have students reflect on the journey, and I think through the mentioned criteria form, through the creating that and having that from the get-go, and also using this in the assessment of each other and in the teacher's assessment of the students, this can provide a red thread through the whole process. And also the digital tools, for instance, to have them to give the students audio feedback in Shobi, and have the students give each other audio feedback, is also more related to then how you can redefine also your assessment through digital tools. And then also through this formative assessment, or through assessing, it's important to have a formative focus, which lets you then determine the road ahead in terms of linguistic proficiency, but also digital literacies. What is it important to allow the students to work on in the near future? So hopefully this has illustrated how one can promote digital literacies and language proficiency, and then also related to intercultural learning simultaneously in the English 7th grade classroom, and how e-based learning can be beneficial and open up to more possibilities for being creative and deriving from the textbook. Yes, and here are my sources. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.